I got a request to do a video on my greenhouse and my setup and what kind of equipment I use and how I keep it cooled and stuff. And it's honestly a really simple setup. It's just a cheap greenhouse that I got a few years back. I don't remember the exact model, but it was about a $500 greenhouse, and it's not one a really fancy glass one or anything, but it's cheap and it's done its job. So I really rely on the climate of the city I live in. It's a coastal city just south of San Francisco. Never really gets above 70 or 75 degrees here, even in the hottest times of year. Occasionally we will get a heat wave, but that's not normal. Usually it stays in the 60s here, so I don't really have to worry too much about the temperatures getting too high. And if it does, I open the vents and the door, or I just take all the Nepenthes out and I put them in the shade somewhere, and I just keep them well misted for the day. In the drier times of year, I do have to install a misting system, or I have to be very diligent about using the hose to mist down everything. And honestly, the humidity does drop into the 40s sometimes here, but the plants don't seem to mind that as long as they're getting misted. In the winter, I take down the shade cloth, which is another thing I use to keep the greenhouse cooled. And then I install a heater and also a bunch of lights. So I'll hang lights over this table here and then over the table over there. So I also have a bunch of fans going in here. I have a fan blowing right over this table and a fan blowing over my helium fora back over there. So yeah, basically just relying on the coastal climate. I open the vents and that keeps the airflow going really well too, and really well cooled. If I lived anywhere else, I would have to have a room AC probably. I'd have to have a humidifier and a bunch of equipment in here, but I really don't need any of that here. Just kind of got lucky with that. And let's see, pests seem to be my biggest problem when growing outdoors. I don't have a problem with rot usually or anything like that, but there are these little rice grain bugs that I call them that do some damage to the leaves. It's usually pretty superficial, but it makes unsightly damage, and sometimes the plants don't like it enough to the point where they'll deform their pitchers. And also sometimes these worms will get on the leaves and start munching away. There's only a few plants in here that are susceptible to that, like my Burbigiae crossvichii is pretty susceptible to those worms, and it's pretty superficial. The plant doesn't really care that much, but it just looks bad, and then it damages the leaves and stuff. But yeah, it's pretty good for growing a variety of different kind of plants. I grow helium fora out here. I have a cephalotus growing. I have a bunch of pinguicula. Some ant plants. So anything tropical, highland seems to like it. I can't grow lowland stuff out here. Those really seem to need the heat and the humidity. I really struggle with that, so I don't really try to grow lowland. But highland Nepenthes do pretty well in this setup. And yeah, so that's pretty much my greenhouse and my setup and all.